what makes a great equity research associate?
They're really good associates.
And one of the questions I'll often get is, how do I stand out? How do I stand out on paper, my resume? And then how do I stand out in interviews? I'd love to talk about some interviews you've done where you left thinking, wow, this person is unbelievable. And maybe if we can think about it in the context of students particularly, is there anything that jumps to mind?
The really good interviews with students.
Welcome back to another episode of the Career Starter Podcast. My name is Ashley Mesquite and I'm your host. If you've already subscribed to the show, thank you very much. But if you're new, please go ahead and subscribe, because today, like every day, I'm going to be bringing you amazing guests, and we're going to uncover the tips and strategies that will help you get your dream job. And once you're in that job, help you launch your career and accelerate it like a rocket ship. Wonderful. Alison, thank you so much for being here. It's great to talk to you, and I know our audience is really going to enjoy this conversation.
Good to be here.
Okay, so why don't we, Alison, start out with, if you can provide us a quick background. I read a very brief bio on you sort of in the lead up to this, but why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are, and specifically, of course, what you're doing now.
Sure. I currently work at BMO Capital Markets. I'm a managing director in the equity research department. I manage a large team of equity research associates, 83 associates globally, a large team in the US, a large team in Canada, and a small team in the UK on the commodity side. I've been at BMO for about 9 years. Prior to that, I was at TD Securities. I worked at TD Securities for 10 years in a research management role there, reading and approving all the research before it went out, and also hiring and recruiting equity research associates on that side. And before that, I was an equity research analyst and an equity research associate covering the Canadian technology space. So I've been in the business for a number of years. Actually started on the buy side at Empire Life, working with a couple of portfolio managers, and then decided that I would move over to the sell side.
That's awesome. So it sounds like you have a lot of experience in hiring associates and in managing associates, being one yourself. So I think this is going to be a super interesting conversation. Yep. Alison, maybe if you can start our audience out with just a very brief description of what equity research is.
Sure. Equity research is collecting information on all of, in BMO's case, almost 900 public companies, all different sectors, all different industries, writing research reports with a recommendation and a target price. So building a financial model and deciding on a recommendation and a target price. And those research reports are then published so that people can use those recommendations to either buy, hold, or sell the stock and the target price on it. So we create research reports on public entities and on the sector as well. And the research report could be 1 page, or it could be 101 pages. It really depends on what the topic is about. If we're launching coverage on a company, then it would be a longer research report. But if they just put out earnings and we want to let the sales and the traders and our clients know that the earnings came out and they were in line, it might just be a couple of paragraphs on 1 page.
Gotcha. And so do you hire, so one of the things I wonder about, I just want to make sure I've got my understanding is correct. Do you hire associates out of school, or is it only if people have prior research or prior experience in other areas?
No, I've hired them straight out of school. It depends. I've hired not a ton out of undergrad, but definitely out of MBA, definitely out of master's. They certainly do not have to have equity research experience. I've hired many really great associates from accounting firms, from consultancies, from corporates, from what else? I'm trying to think of. Oh, from mining engineers. So just recently hired someone from an actual mine. They'd spent many years as a mining engineer, out of mine. So that's a specific skill set that we're looking for. Also hire PhDs for our biopharma healthcare team. They are very valuable in interpreting drug trial results. So we take them straight out of PhD school so that they can help on that side of things. So do not have to have equity research experience. Sometimes an analyst will say to me, Alison, I really need someone with equity research experience to hit the ground running and to be able to help me with my franchise. I would say that's the exception rather than the rule. Most want to have someone that they can mold, they can teach, they can groom and be part of their team. Teach them to write like they write, teach them to model like they model, as opposed to bringing someone in who's already decided how they're going to write and already decided that this is the way that they're going to model. So many analysts will say to me, and it's something that I do before I start recruiting for an analyst and associate, I say, what are you looking for? Do you want, like, if they're not an accountant, they might say to me, I need a CA, I need a CPA to back up their skill set. If they're not an engineer, they might ask me to get an engineer so that I can, so that there's a collaborative element to it. So very varied backgrounds that we have in terms of skill set and education and experience.
And so then, Alison, it sounds to me like where I was going to say go next is, what makes a great equity research associate? Do you find that varies based on the needs of the analyst, or are there certain sort of common threads that you would you'd be able to identify across the really good associates you've seen over time?
I think there are. The really good associates are curious. They have a passion for news. They are interested in investing. They're interested in the capital markets. If you don't have those things, it's very much a mechanical job and you're not going to enjoy it. It's hard work. It's long hours. You're going to be doing a lot of monotonous work that might not be that exciting. But if you are really into the markets and you think that news is really cool, and you're curious about how companies react to economic data or political data or the weather or whatever it is, then you're going to think that this is, it's kind of cool. You're going to be, as soon as you start to research these companies, you're going to start looking around and you're going to be like, hey, I wonder if that gets impacted by the company that I'm covering and that kind of thing. When I was a technology associate, I didn't really think that much about it. I was covering the TMT sector, comm equipment, and I was on a chairlift one day and I looked up and there's this cell tower with so much comm equipment on it. And I was thinking, wow, I wonder if any of my companies have equipment on that tower, and that's the way you start to think about it. So the good associates get really into things like that. They're very into, being curious about things, following news, following the economy, reading about it, reading books about it, listening to podcasts about it, that kind of thing. We have a Teams chat at BMO with all the associates on it. And people are frequently putting book recommendations in there or things that, that they've read that help them with their analysis, that kind of thing. So I think that, you have to have that mindset and that aptitude. Otherwise, it's just a job.
And without giving away the secrets of the empire, how do you figure that out in interviews?
Yeah. I have a set of questions, and when I first started doing this, I decided that I would ask all associate candidates the same questions because I wanted to have, to be able to comp them against each other, that kind of thing. And I can usually tell pretty early. But I want to see that they're passionate about being in equity research. So of course I asked them, why do you think that you want to be in equity research? And I want them to tell me things like, I follow the news. I love the news. I watch CNN all the time. I'm always doing this. I invest personally. The number of times I've asked associate candidates if they invest personally and they tell me no straight away, I'm kind of like, oh, okay, well, and I get that if you're just out of university, you don't have any liquidity but there's ways to invest without breaking the bank. So,
and there are paper trading accounts where you
yeah,
can sort of invest with like fake money to kind of get a feel for things.
yeah. So, I mean, I want them to be interested in that kind of thing. So, I have these questions that kind of teases that out a little bit. Why do you think that you want to be in equity research? You tell me why you think you want to be in equity research. I asked them about writing and modeling. One of the big things that people don't realize about being an equity research associate is that you're going to have to write a lot. And some people don't like to write, and they don't realize that writing is a huge part of equity research. They know that modeling is, and they know that, communicating with sales and with trading and with clients is, but they don't realize how much writing is going to be involved in this. And if you don't like to write, you're going to find it a big struggle to have to do this. So, as I say, I have these questions that kind of teases it out of them a little bit. And I have questions that I purposely ask them, what do you like to do in your spare time? Because I want them to tell me, what they do when they're not working. And I've had more than one candidate tell me that they financial model in their spare time, and that's fine. But do you really financial model in your spare time, or do you think that's what I want to hear? And it's actually not what I want to hear, right? I do want to hear that they have other interests, that they have a trading account, that they play pickleball, that they, whatever it is that they do, I want to hear about that. And I want to see
one-dimensional.
That they're not one-dimensional, that they know how to manage their time, that they know how to, leave work and do something else, that they have a different aspect to their life, so if they tell me they really like movies, or they like to read, or they like podcasts, or whatever it is, that they have this sort, or they like to travel. I mean, traveling is a big one for me. I really feel like you can't analyze these global companies if you've never traveled, if you've never left Canada, or you've never left the United States or something like that. You just have to have that experience. And so I try to get this information during the interview. I typically do the first round interview 30 to 45 minutes. I have this set of questions that I go through, and I use the same questions, as I said, for each candidate, so that I can have a relative comparison. And I can typically tell a lot from the questions and from the answers that I'm getting. But hiring's 50-50. You never know.
You do your best, people can try and extract the relevant info, but yeah.
Yeah. And our process at BMO is intense. I do the first round of interviews. And then we will make a short list, and we will do an evaluation. So a modeling and a writing evaluation, and then we'll narrow it down further, and the analysts will do an interview, and then the associate, if there is one, will do an interview. We may bring in another analyst team as well. We may bring in someone from sales and trading, and then the final one or two candidates will go in front of the DOR as well.
The director of research.
The director of research. We do all of those interviews for two reasons. For us to do our due diligence on the candidates, but also for the candidates to meet as many BMO people as possible and decide whether BMO is where they want to be. We want people to come to BMO who want to be at BMO. And so we do really hope that during that process, they meet enough BMO people and they get to know enough BMO people that they're like, yeah, I want to go and work at that company. That sounds like a good company to work. Usually one of those meetings will involve a meal. We think that this is, it's a good way to meet, to talk to someone and to discover a little bit more about them, that kind of thing. So typically, one of the last ones that, if there is an existing associate on the team, they'll go for lunch with the candidate.
I love that. It's actually a hard and fast rule I have as well. I won't hire someone unless I've had a meal with them, because
Yeah.
there are too many things going on at that moment where it's, being polite to the wait staff, eating politely, interacting in a social fashion, answering questions, because we're also going to be talking about some of the relevant issues. There's just too much to stay on top of if you're trying to fake it.
Yeah.
I love it.
I believe it as well.
I think you highlighted something really interesting, Alison, as well earlier with respect to I think you're asking them these questions, and this is super important from a candidate's perspective as well. If you're not interested in this stuff and you're not passionate about it, and you're going to get there and you're going to hate your job, and that's not good for anybody.
Nope.
It's so easy to be drawn. Like, I think it's so easy to be drawn to. It's like, oh, this is a great job and it pays quite well and it sounds really interesting. But if you're not legit interested in it, it's not going to work out well for anybody.
No, it's not going to. It is a hard job, and earnings season is not fun. It's a grind, and if you aren't passionate about learning about these companies and about talking to management and, reading research and writing it, it's a grind, and you will not last in it. It's not something, lots of people talk about how investment banking is a grind. It is, but so is equity research. And I think that if you don't really like it, you won't stick around in it. The ones who really like it and are passionate about it are good, and they move quickly up the ranks as well.
Is it fair to say that equity research has seasonal intensity, if you will, and that it waxes and wanes probably a little more than investment banking might, which might have a sort of constitutively higher level of intensity?
Yeah. I mean, I always tell equity research associates that you're going to work long hours, but you're going to know when those long hours are coming. Earnings season is earnings season. Comes around 4 times a year. You typically know the dates that your companies are reporting in advance. And yeah, you could have 5 reporting on one day. Absolutely. You could have 5 reporting on one day, and you're going to be up all night and it's going to be long. But you know that in advance. On Monday, you know that on Thursday, it's going to be tough. There's going to be 4 companies reporting. It's going to be a long night. In investment banking, your MD can arrive at your desk at 4 o'clock on Friday and tell you that he or she hopes you brought a toothbrush because you're not going home. And so investment banking is very unpredictable that way. Equity research is a little more predictable. You're still going to get the M&A announcement on Thursday, where 2 of your companies have bought each other, and now you're going to put those 2 models together and you're going to do it. That still does happen. So there is some unpredictability to equity research, but it is very much a seasonal thing. You have these times, earnings season, it's busy. One of the interesting things about equity research is, when these busy times are, and that that's what you're going to do in the busy times. You have earnings season, you have conference calls, you have models to update, you have earnings notes to write, all of this kind of thing. But the whole time that's happening, and when I first started at BMO, there was the director of research was a gentleman by the name of Mike Miller, and he said to me, in between earnings season, you have all these pots on the stove, and you have to pull those pots forward and give them a little stir and put it back again, and make sure that none of the pots boils over while you're doing earnings season. And so you always have stuff that you have to do, but you have to do earnings season as well. And, you might be working on a deep dive on a particular industry, or you might be working on an initiation report or something like that. So you're always having to stir these pots to keep them going so that you can come back to them when earnings season is over. So there is a seasonality or predictability to it, but there's always something to do.
That's a really interesting way to think about it. I'd love to follow up on something you mentioned earlier about candidates figuring out if BMO is the place they want to work. And I won't ask you to say bad things about competitors. I'm sure you wouldn't anyway. But what I'd be interested in knowing is what are the things that you think make BMO particularly attractive as a place for someone to come and work as an equity research associate?
I think one of the things that we have really tried to do is to make sure that the associates have these opportunities, as you and I have talked about, to do more than just equity research. And so equity research associate is the entry level job in equity research. It's how you get in. You come in as an associate. You stay 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 years, but you're probably going to go on and do something else. And what I want to make sure, I was put into this role 4 years ago, to make sure that our associates knew that we cared about them, that we wanted to develop them, that we wanted to give them the skills, not only to do their job, but to do their job really well and to be able to advance their careers. And I tell the associates all the time, I'm interested in your career, no matter what it looks like. If you want to go to investment banking, I will introduce you to people in investment banking. If you'd like to go to the sales and trading desk, I will introduce you to people on the sales and trading desk. We've done that for current associates. We have them on the sales desk at BMO. We have them in investment banking. If you'd like to go to a client, there's lots of clients we can introduce you to. Corporates, whatever it is. I want the associates to learn and to develop their skills and to really have a marketable product that they can take out and they can advance their careers and keep going. So I've actually heard people have told me that there is no one like me at the other shops. Like, most associates report to their analyst, and the analyst does their performance review, and the analyst determines how they're going to get trained, and the analyst determines everything like that. I collect feedback from the analyst absolutely on the associates and involve them in all of the promotion discussions and everything like that. But I'm sort of that in-between person. So if the associate is like, I'm done with my analyst, they can come straight to me and talk to me about it. They don't have to go to their analyst, and we can figure out, how we're going to deal with this. It hopefully allows for better career management, better career development on these associates. They can, BMO has a very good track record of promoting from within. So we have associate, we have senior associate, we have VP associate. And if the associate is interested in starting to cover, then we have that discussion. Would you like to cover names in your own sector? Are you interested in another sector? That kind of thing. So we were suffering from high attrition, and we wanted to figure out how we could attract and retain good associates, and develop them. And so this is the way that we did it, to try to make sure that we could get the best people in, keep them, and then use them either for us or for somewhere else in the firm.
It's when you say that, it reminds me, like, what I hear is growth mindset versus fixed mindset, and that you're recognizing like that people are going to move on to more senior roles in different places, and you're better off attracting and training really good people who then go do interesting things and potentially become clients of yours or have relationships with BMO longer term.
Yeah. The analysts don't always agree, but I say to the analysts, we went out and we hired smart, talented, competitive, driven associates. We can't expect them to stay in a box when we hire them. Like, we went purposely and got that person because they had these attributes. We can't put them in a box. We have to keep developing that person, that skill set, whatever it is. And if that means that they then become a client, perfect. Check that box. We've established the relationship. It's a great one. So the analysts don't, they don't want to have to retrain an associate or anything like that. But so many of the analysts were associates. They know that
that works.
It's the circle of life.
That's right. Excellent. I know we're jumping around here, but you've sort of thrown some really interesting ideas out. So I want to follow those as we go. Let's jump back to the getting the job part. A big part of our audience is going to be students who are looking to break into the industry. And one of the questions I'll often get is, how do I stand out? How do I stand out on paper, my resume, and then how do I stand out in interviews? You've touched on a couple of those things. I'd love to talk about some interviews you've done where you left thinking, wow, this person is unbelievable. And maybe if we can think about it in the context of students particularly, is there anything that jumps to mind? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
The really good interviews with students, they are prepared. They've done some research on me. It's a research job that they're applying for. Do some research on me. It's you don't have to Google very far and you'll find me. So, do some research on BMO. Do some research if you know the sector that you're interviewing for. Do some research on that sector. Show me that you are able to do that research. They are thoughtful, obviously on time. They have good questions. I've done many interviews where the candidate doesn't have any questions at the end, which you should have at least one question.
Absolutely.
Think of something. But
this is a place that you might be. This is a place that you might be spending the next 2, 3, 4 years of your life.
Right.
There's probably some questions you should be asking.
Yeah, you should probably ask something. And sometimes I think maybe they get all the way to the end of the interview and they're like, I don't want to work there. And so they just sort of, blow it off or whatever it is. I'm not sure. But I have had people say to me, I don't have any questions. And I'm kind of like, okay. You're not curious about anything? Really?
But that's useful information as well.
It is useful information. Everything, I'm a people person. I take every part of the interview, what's missing, what is there, what they're wearing, where they're sitting. I take all of that into consideration.
Tell me more about what you mean by that in terms of what they're wearing, where they're sitting.
I've had people do interviews in hoodies and baseball caps, which
this is a professional interview you're coming for. So
yeah, no cameras, which I find odd. I think, I think you should test your technology before you do your interview. Make sure you know how to use the technology. Make sure your camera works. Make sure you're in a quiet place. That kind of thing. I've had cats walk across the desk in front of people, which is, it's kind of quirky, but that kind of thing. I've had moms come in the door behind. I've had everything. I've had a lot of interview things. I had one where the person was on a cell phone walking down the street. And that's, the respect level is you have to decide that, how you're going to portray yourself. And I think that's really important, right? The good ones are on time, professionally dressed. I don't need you to be in a full suit and tie, but I need you to be respectful of the professional environment. These are the ones that I've done virtually. I've done lots of in-person interviews as well. But again, it's the same on an in-person interview. Be on time, dress appropriately, ask good questions. Sometimes they'll be late in there and they say, oh, well, I didn't know where I was going. Do some research, find out where you're going. That kind of thing.
Prepare ahead of time.
Prepare ahead of time. These sound like basic things, but they're really gonna to make an impression on the person that you're meeting with. I think it's really important to make that first impression. Shake my hand, look me in the eye. Eye contact is a big one. I've had many interviews where they don't make eye contact, which, you know, I get that they are interviewing for a research position and there's a lot, it's, you know, data heavy and there's a lot of work that has to be done, but you still are going to have to communicate with people around you the whole time. So yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of different ones, but the good ones I do remember, engaging, good stories, good questions for me, thoughtful in their answers, taking the time to answer my questions, and even saying to me, may I take a few minutes to think about this? I'm more than happy for people to take a few minutes to think about it. Or I've had people who at the end of the interview, they say, can we go back to that other question? I want to go back. So I say, sure, we can go back to that other question. Or they email me afterwards. I really like that question and I want to, you know, elaborate on it for you, that kind of thing. And speaking of emailing afterwards, the thank you email is good. I really do like the thank you email. It shows a level of professionalism. It shows that you've taken the time to find my email, because my associate sets up my interviews for me. So she's the point of contact, but my email address is in there. And I've had people who say, well, I couldn't because I didn't have your email address. And I'm like, you did. You could find it.
This is a research job.
This is a research job. And a lot of it comes back to that when I'm thinking about it, like, do a little bit of research. Like, you could actually do this. So those are the types of sort of, especially for, you know, if you're in your final year of school and you're starting to do these interviews, be professional, treat them as a professional thing. You're about to go into a very professional banking environment where first impressions are important. And so I think that it's like those types of basic things are really key.
Interesting. You mentioned good stories. I'm curious about that. Tell me more about that.
That they have good stories?
Yeah. What makes a good story? What is it like? What are the ones that stick out? Not necessarily the specific story themselves, but what is it about those stories that sticks out to you?
I think when they feel comfortable enough to tell me a story about, you know, school or their first job or their summer job or something like that, it gives me that little insight into them, which I like to see. I want to learn a little bit more about these people. And so some of my interviews are 20, 25 minutes because I get one-word answers. And those are not helpful to me. And it doesn't matter how much I pry and probe, I still get these very perfunctory answers. And you know, maybe that's their personality, but that's not what I need in this job. I need people who are going to be able to actually talk to company management and get company management to tell them stuff. So I'm going to need people who can speak, who can be social, who can have these conversations. I want people to be, a couple of my questions are to tell me about a company that you admire, not necessarily one that you would invest in, but a company that you admire. So I want them to think about a company that they would admire and why. And it's interesting to me, the companies that they pick, you know, recently Tesla, Nvidia, Apple, Costco, like people pick different companies, and then they tell me, you know, why they admire them, which is good. That's what I want to hear. Some of them will say to me, is this the stock pitch? And I say, no, it's not the stock pitch. I want you to tell me about a company that, you know, that you admire. I think they've been trained in school. You're going to get a stock pitch. Make sure you're ready to do a stock pitch. I sort of want to hear a stock pitch, but I'd rather hear them qualitatively tell me why they admire this company, or, you know, something like that. And I want them, you know, I'll ask them about their greatest strengths and their greatest weaknesses. And I want them to be honest. I want them to, you know, I don't want them to just tell me like one word. I want them to give me an example of why they are smart or why they are hardworking or whatever it is that they are. So I'm a people person, and I really do want to hear about these people and get to know them a little more. That's how I'm going to be able to tell whether or not they can be an equity research associate.
And the good stories, I think, too, are the ones that highlight those aspects of them, right? And you
Yeah.
touched on earlier what makes a great research associate. The earlier coffee chats and informational interviews they do, like that's how you construct the picture of what makes someone good at this job. And then by the time they get to you, they should have stories that demonstrate those characteristics.
Yep.
And do you see people who do that effectively?
Yep. I've seen just recently I had an interview with someone who'd had several coffee chats with analysts and with associates, and they were able to effectively frame their work experience. They had no equity research work experience, but they were able to effectively tell me their work experience through an equity research lens. You know, each part of their experience and how it could be beneficial in the equity research associate role. And they told me that they had spoken with an analyst and with an associate at BMO, and that they, you know, that's how they got to this point. So I think it is really important, especially for those who don't have any experience in equity research, is to learn as much about the job and about equity research and about the capital markets, and be able to tell a story of you in that light.
So it's a little bit like, you highlighted curiosity earlier. I'm a huge believer in that for, my professional role as well. And so one of the ways that someone could demonstrate that is talk about how their, an earlier work experience that highlights that curiosity. Even if it's not an equity research, curiosity runs across one's life. There's plenty of opportunities to be curious and to demonstrate why you're a curious person.
Yep. Yeah, all of that. If you were in the lawn business when you were a teenager or something like that, you were entrepreneurial, and you set up this lawn business, and you did the business part of it, you did the marketing part of it, you did the customer service part of it, you did all of that. And I think that's, me seeing that. Some people wouldn't put that on their resume, but I think it's important. Like, that shows initiative, it shows organization, it shows customer service. There's so many good parts of that I think, and I love to hear stories like that. I love to hear that in university I did this. I was the coordinator for the Lug Hockey League, and I was the one who signed up everybody, and I did all, like, those are the types of things that I like to see. And I mean, I say this all the time to candidates. I actually do want to see on your resume some of the other things that you did, like that you do. If you travel, if you play pickleball, if you play hockey, I want to see that you do other things, particularly if you played sports at a high level at university. That shows me that you have really good time management. So if you are a varsity level athlete while you were at university, you did both things at the same time.
And performed well academically.
I mean, those are what I want to see, that you were able to do both of those things, and that you are able to manage your time. You're able to be successful academically and in whatever sport you chose to do, or if you were, on the debate team or whatever it was, some sort of extracurricular activity. I want to see that you were involved in it, whether it was a club, a sports team, whatever it is. I want to see that part of it as well.
We've touched on this a little bit. I'm curious if there's anything you would share here. Now that you know the process well, having been on the other side, are there any kind of, I wouldn't say tips and tricks, but is there anything where if you were navigating it for the first time yourself now, knowing what you know, and maybe, we've touched on something, if there's anything else that jumps out at you where knowing what you know that you would make sure you did or you would do a little differently?
I had one interview before I got my first equity research associate job, and I had no idea what I was getting into. I interviewed with the the analyst. He was the paper and forest products analyst. I interviewed with him and he hired me. I didn't meet anybody else. I don't think I wrote anything. I don't really remember. But and then I was in the chair for 2 weeks, and the director of research called me into his office and he said, "We just fired your analyst." And I said, "What?" And
Wow.
I had left my buy side job and gone over to the sell side and was all set to be an equity research associate in the paper and forest product sector, and my analyst got fired. And I was like, okay. So, I mean, in hindsight, I probably should have, I should have done a bit more research into what I was getting into. And I don't think at the time I knew even that much about sell side research. I had been on the buy side. I had talked to some research analysts in my role on the buy side, but I hadn't really done that much research even into the analysts that I was going to be working with. And so it was interesting. I then was offered the opportunity to work with the technology analyst, and I moved over to him. And I did do a bit more of my own research, and sort of figured that out. So in terms of if I was navigating it again, I don't think that you have to be particularly, unless you're very, very passionate about a particular sector. I mean, if you are, if you're really, really passionate about climate change and renewables or something like that, and that's where you want to be, then yes, do that. Or if you have a mining engineering degree, then, do some research and make sure that you're focused on getting a mining job there. But if you're just sort of generically interested in equity research, I think you do need to do some research into the different sectors that are available, the different analysts who cover those sectors. I'm not sure if you can get any ratings data by yourself, but you could probably just do some Googling about research analysts, or even the ones who are in the news, that kind of thing. But yeah, I think you do want to make sure that you understand who you're going to be working with. If what are some of the names that they cover, what are some of the sectors, that kind of thing. I mean, at the time I started working at a very small shop, a small independent brokerage. If you're curious about the firm that you're going to go to, the differences between the banks or a boutique or a small brokerage, that kind of thing, think about that type of questioning that you might want to do, and have some questions for the analyst about their process and about how they think about things and what they like their associate to do. Do they do the modeling? Does the associate do the modeling? Do you do the writing? That kind of thing. So some ideas about how the analyst process is, their investment process, how they think about companies. Do they meet with management only during the quarter, other times, that kind of thing. So I would do, as someone who was just starting out, I would probably have done a little bit more research than I did.
And it sounds like there are, this goes back to something you touched on earlier about asking questions. When you're talking to you and then to the analyst and the associate, assuming there is one, there are a ton of questions you should be asking.
Yeah.
And that probably distinguishes people as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you do want people who, because it goes back to the curiosity thing, right? You do want people who are like interested in this and curious about it, that kind,
And so then there's a written component, there's a modeling component. Presumably that's where the technical aspect of things are covered. They probably wouldn't. So much of the interview process then is either kind of behavioral questions or get to know you questions or understanding you questions. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fair characterization. Mine are a combination of technical and behavioral. I ask some technical ones about valuation, that type of thing. But I don't get too far into the weeds on it. My question on valuation is more just to see if if they've thought about valuation, if they've taken any courses on valuation, that kind of thing. The modeling exercise, each analyst is a little bit different. BMO doesn't have a standard one that we use. Each analyst has their own. They like to kind of craft it for their own sector. So sometimes they will, and sometimes it'll be timed, sometimes it won't be. We try to make it so that we can use it to determine their time management, their attention to detail, their accuracy, and their knowledge level.
So then coming in with above average Excel skills is probably something that's kind of useful.
Very useful. Above average Excel skills is one of the most important aspects of being an equity research associate. Many of our associates coming in now are well-versed in Python, in VBA, in lots of charting, lots of, different functions within Excel. Not just being able to build a financial model from scratch, but also to be able to use a lot of the data analytics and the data manipulation tools that are available within Excel.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, good to know. Last one on sort of the job search side of things. Is there something that candidates seem to think is important that really isn't? Is there anything that jumps out at you that way?
I think I get the stock pitch thing, but it seems too rehearsed when I get it. By the time I get it, it just seems really very rehearsed, and it feels like they did this for a school assignment and they're just regurgitating it for me. So that's why I try to make it, I ask the admire question. I also say to them, I ask them if they invest personally, and I then say, if I gave you $10 million, how would you invest it? So then they can't, some of them do. Then they can't pitch me one stock, because really, would you invest $10 million in one stock? But some of them actually do tell me one stock. So then that makes them think about asset allocation and diversification, and then it kind of brings in some more of the technical parts of investing. I asked them whether or not they would consider commodities or physical real estate or gold or crypto and things like that. So I want to see what their breadth of knowledge is on the investment basis. So my questions are partly behavioral with a few sort of technical investment ones put in there. Many of the analysts are doing it on fit, making sure that they're going to fit on their team, and the associate as well. The analyst and the associate, if there is a current associate and we're adding to the team, they'll often do a panel interview together to try to see if the fit is there. Then they'll do them separately to make sure as well. We just did one in New York where they also brought in a whole other team as well that they collaborate with on a regular basis. So brought that team in as well to make sure that the fit would be there, because that's a really important part of it. You want the person, them to fit with that team, both culturally, work-wise, experience-wise, because you want it to be, if they're a CPA or a CA, then that's complementary to the other skill sets that we have. So, those are the types of things that we think about.
Interesting. Let's very quickly shift gears to the early career type side of things. We touched a little bit on this earlier on. I'd love to sort of dive a little bit deeper, and then we'll wrap up from there. Is there anything you notice in common with associates who you hire who seem to struggle and it just doesn't seem to work out? Are there any patterns that you've noticed?
I think it goes back to the, just a job or passion. As you said, this is a well-paying job, and it's a job that requires a certain skill level. But if you aren't really passionate about it, passionate about looking at these companies, passionate about investing and the economy and politics and the macro factors and all of these kind of things. It can be a draining job. It's hard work, and the ones who don't get it and don't excel aren't really into it. Like they just,
It's hard to get fired up for a demanding job if you don't really enjoy it.
Right. Yeah. Like, and they don't, one of the things that we like the associates to do, after they've sort of acclimatized to their new job is I take them all down to the sales and trading desk and show them, this is where it happens. This is how we make the money. And I tell them, you can come down here anytime you want. The salespeople will always be happy to see you. The traders will always be happy to see you. Maybe don't come down right at market open, but come down. And I say to them as well, if you want to come down at market open, just come and sit and watch, because you're going to learn a lot if you're just sitting there at that time. And I will take 4 or 5 of them down at the time, and the sales and the traders are amazing, and they will often say, here, pull up a chair, sit, watch, anytime you want, that kind of thing. And the associates who do that and really like that are the ones who are going to excel, because now they know the research that I produce gets used by those people and they make the money. And so I can always tell, because I collect feedback from the sales and the trading team on the associates, and they'll say to me, that one's really good. He gets it. She gets it. She comes down all the time. She's always asking us questions. She's always feeding us information, all of that kind of thing. And those are the ones who excel. They are confident enough that they will go down to the sales and trading desk. They will reach out to the salespeople. They will do what it takes to get the information to the clients and to the salespeople. If you don't have that passion and that interest in it, it's not going to work. It's, I need to see that. I need the associates to realize that equity research is an enabling business. We do research so that sales and trading can make money, investment banking can make money, prime brokerage can make money, the wealth advisors can make money. Like, equity research is used by all the different constituents in the bank. And I need the associates to realize that they're not just pumping out research for fun, that it's actually a business that we're running. And the ones who get that, the sooner they get that, the more successful they are.
So it sounds like it's a multi-factor job, right? It's both technical, it's interpersonal, and it also, I mean, what you're saying also sort of to my ear, it means that this is also a relationship job. This is a relationship, and I think that sometimes it can get missed pretty easily.
Yeah, because it's not relationship immediately. And that's one of the hard things for many associates. They are driven, they are smart, they are talented, but it takes 12 to 18 months to become proficient at it. You have to go through several earning seasons. Your first earning season, you're not going to have a clue what is going on. By the second one, you're going to kind of remember, oh yeah, that's the CEO, that's the CFO, that's what they said. By the third one, you're like, yeah, I got this. I can update the model. I can start the research report. So, if you think about it, that's 3 quarters. You're starting. So I always tell the associates 12 to 18 months for you to get really, really comfortable. And that's when I want you to lift up your head and realize that there's a whole other part of your job. Relationships with sales and trading, relationships with your clients, relationships with your corporates, all of these types of things. But you can't do that until you've got that good, solid knowledge of your companies and your sector and what drives your companies and your sector. You want to be able to confidently go to sales and answer their questions. You want to be able for that salesperson to say, hey, let's get on the phone with the client and you can tell them about it right now. That's what you want to be able to do. So the frustration part with some associates is that they don't do that straight away. But the reality is they can't, because they don't have the knowledge base yet. So they have
Yeah.
to get that knowledge base, and then they can do it. But it very much is a relationship. There very much is a sales component to it as well. By the time you get to be an analyst and you just downgraded a stock, you got to sell that. You got to be able to explain to the portfolio manager why you just downgraded that stock and take the stock and everything else. So there is a huge relationship selling component to it that isn't always apparent at the beginning.
That's a really important insight, actually. I think about the capture the proficiency first, build the proficiency, and then there's a whole another layer to things that emerges.
Yeah.
And so what's surprise, even the good ones, so sort of across the board, are there things that surprise people when they start in equity research? Not necessarily like, oh my God, this is terrible, as opposed to, I didn't really realize that was part of this. It makes sense now that I'm here, but I didn't really think of it.
I was telling it to the co-op students I was talking to today. One of the things that we do in equity research is boots on the ground research. The mining team goes and visits the mines, make sure that there's actually gold in that mine. Our toys, games, and leisure analysts and associate go to the toy shows, go to the video game shows. They go to Harley Davidson dealers and talk to the Harley Davidson dealers about the products and about the sales flow and everything like that. The C-store, the dollar store analyst will actually visit dollar stores and see what's on the shelves and visit them repeatedly to see if the stuff is still on the shelves from before. Go to Costco, make sure that they understand what how the stores are laid out, all this type of thing. So we do actual boots on the ground research, really trying to make sure that we know about these companies, because we want to write research reports and talk to our clients and be able to give them those details and back up what we're saying in our research reports. If we're going to upgrade a company or we're going to downgrade a company, we're going to initiate coverage on a company, we want to have done all of our research on all parts of it, the supply chain part of it, the customers, the production part of everything, all parts of it. And so it's not just about reading the financials of a company and reading the annual reports of a company and maybe talking to the CFO and the IR person or something like that. We go out there and we make sure that we actually can say, we visited that mine, we talked to the mine manager, we've seen it, we went down there, we know what's going on there. In the case of oil and gas, the same thing. In the case of the biopharma, the drug trials, they'll actually go to a lot of these conferences where the drug companies are presenting the drugs that they are about to launch, that kind of thing. So we do lots of boots on the ground research that contributes to the research reports. So I think some people think, oh, well, they just build models and write research reports. We got to have some content. So we go out and get the content for that research.
Oh, that's really interesting. Let me ask you one more and then we'll wrap up. We'll move to our wrap up questions from there. Alison, is there any advice you would give to someone who is, maybe they're going to be starting in equity research in a month and they want to try and hit the ground running? Is there anything you would throw out to them other than try and catch up on your sleep ahead of time?
I do tell them that as well. And I tell the research associates, before earnings season starts, I say, fill up your fridge, go to the gym, get some sleep, make sure that you do all those things. I think that, if you know the sector that you're going into, start doing some reading on it. Start looking at research reports, not just the ones that your analyst wrote, but if you can get your hands on other research reports as well. Start to think about how research reports are framed. If you're not already reading trade journals and things like that, start looking at those. I often have associates who will ask me or ask the analyst, what sources, what trades, what newspapers, what journals do you read? And I can start, brushing up on them, even websites that they go to on a regular basis, I can start brushing up on those. I like it when the associate candidates, as we're doing the 3-week background check, they usually reach out to me and say, what could I be doing to prepare? How should I be doing? How should I be preparing for this? What can I read? What's the coverage list of the analyst that I'm going to work for? And that's easy enough. I mean, I can give them the coverage list and then they can start doing their own research on those companies themselves. So that type of proactiveness is good, to be able to come in and at least know the names of the companies that you're going to be covering, and what they do. Especially in Canada, where the many of the sectors are special sits-ish, like they have, we have an analyst and an associate team, they cover Sleep Country. Well, it's the only company in that space, and they just got bought out. I think they were the one that just got bought by PE. But so you learn all about the mattress business for one company, or you learn all about the some of their business for just one company. So I think that associates who can prepare as much in advance for the sector that they're going to cover, I think that will stand them in good stead for their first day.
Outstanding. A couple of quick mechanical ones, if I could, or mechanical type questions, if I could. Do you hire interns? Is that correct?
So we hire co-ops, and we hire summer student interns. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
And then when I think about how someone gets on your radar, how is it? So I'm going to throw out a few ideas, and if there's anything you would add to this, maybe that would be, helpful. So if someone is, I'm sure you probably post in some schools, is that fair? If someone's not in one of those targeted schools, reaching out for coffee chats to people, is that another way to get on the radar?
Yeah, lots of, and all the associates are great culture carriers. They always are meeting with students to have coffee chats.
That's awesome. Okay. I have 2 wrap-up questions that I like to ask. One is, are there any books you would recommend, or podcasts you would recommend, or anything like that you would recommend students who are interested in getting in equity research would be well served to familiarize themselves with, read, listen to, that kind of thing?
It's funny. I don't know about getting into equity research, but I like podcasts about business or about businesses, but that also are interesting. Like there's a new one out about, I'm going to date myself here, about about the Bre-X scandal, but it's really interesting. Like, and Bre-X went down when I was an associate. It was the one that was sort of really the story that shocked everyone.
It was legendary.
It was legendary, right? And I mean, and there were research analysts involved in it. Like they were intimately involved in this. So it's like the $6 billion gold scandal. So it's a good one because it's historical, but it's also interesting,
Yeah.
There's people falling out of planes, and there's people, it's very interesting. I think that one is really good. The other one is it's the Barry and Honey Sherman, I think it was Apotex. They were they were a big pharma, and they're a Canadian couple who were found dead in their home. But when you start to listen to the podcast, there was a whole bunch of like business stuff and insider trading and everything that was going on in this whole, the whole story and the scandal and everything like that. And it's an unsolved mystery. Like no one's ever been committed of that crime. I like those types of things. So I tend to look for podcasts that are about business or about business people. There's a BBC one about billionaires, which is also really good, and it's all about different billionaires that are out there. So those are the types of podcasts that I tend to listen to.
You know,
And there's also one called 10% Happier, which is also a good one. I just heard about that one and I started listening to that one, which is more about grounding yourself for work in the capital markets like we do. It kind of brings you to a more zen
place.
Yeah.
Excellent. That sounds really interesting. We'll put all these in the show notes so people can we'll link to them so people can track them down afterwards. But it sounds really interesting. I actually would love to listen to that BRIEX one because I was in my early days in the industry too when that happened.
Yeah. Yeah, it was fascinating. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the reasons that people do mindset visits now, because, to make sure there's gold.
Yeah. And I think
there's actually gold.
And I think what you said highlights something so interesting too, right? Because if you're into this industry, and it doesn't have to be the BRIEX one, it doesn't have to be whatever, but if you're listening to podcasts about business, one, it's a proxy for, yeah, you're interested. But two, when they come and talk to you, it's such a more interesting discussion. Because when I think back to what we've talked about today, one of the things that jumps out at me, and I'd be curious if I'm interpreting it correctly, is having a thoughtful discussion about business, about research, about companies, about the type of work you're going to be doing. The more you understand this stuff, one, the better your position you're going to be probably trying to get a role in the industry. But two, you'll be able to understand, do I even care about this?
Yep, I think that's true. And the more I have those types of conversations, the more I can tell whether or not, they're going to flourish in this environment. Will they be able to have a conversation? The other thing that I didn't bring up, which can be surprising for an associate, because it's for sure it happened to me and it's happened to other associates as well. On your first week in the job, you can find yourself in the back of a car with the CEO and the IR person and the CFO of a company, because we are always doing non-deal roadshows. So we're taking companies around to meet with clients. And oftentimes there'll be two companies at the same time. And so your analyst takes one of the companies and you end up with the other company. So it's a company that you cover. You've only been in the job for 4 days, but you have to sit in the back of the car with the CEO and the CFO and have some kind of a conversation. You probably can't talk very intelligently about the company because you just started, but you have to be able to have a conversation. So when I'm interviewing associates, I think, would I be okay if that person was in the back and you have to represent BMO? Am I okay with that person representing BMO to the CEO of this company? So that is a true story. It's actually happened to many associates where they find themselves in the position where they are chaperoning a company around to visit with clients. And then the other part of that is that some clients don't let you in. So then you just have to sit in the lobby and wait for the CEO to come out of the meeting and take them to the next meeting. So I want to make sure that I have hired associates who are equally comfortable doing that as they are building a financial model.
That's so interesting. And it speaks to one of the things that I think is so great about this job. And there's a few jobs that I would sort of put in this category where part of the hard work is it results in you taking years of learning and compressing it, but also being exposed to very senior leaders at serious companies. And you're in the car with them. You're having meals with them from time to time. You're asking them questions. You're interrogating them. And so you're building this very broad skill set. You get exposure to people at a senior level you would never normally get exposed to at such a young age. And so that's, I think, part of what makes it such an interesting job.
It is. It does. It's such an interesting job. I was on an analyst day for one of the companies, and we went to this dinner club in Montreal, and there was all these analysts and the CFO and the CEO and everything like that. And I was the only woman. And so they put me beside the CEO. So we're all standing around this table, one of those hollow circle tables. Everyone was standing around, and the CEO was standing beside me. So he and I started to talk, and we were talking, and then What we didn't realize was that everybody in the room was waiting for me to sit down because I was the only woman. And finally I looked up and I was like, oh my goodness, yes, please sit down. But it was just one of those situations where, I was an associate and I don't know where my analyst was. I think there was probably something going on at the same time, but I ended up sitting right beside the CEO of this company for the whole dinner. So I had to have a conversation with him, about his company, about life, he was a fabulous CEO. I mean, and, very, very personable. But those are the types of situations where, as a relatively junior person, you are exposed to a very senior leader at a big company in Canada or in the United States or wherever, where you were representing your firm.
One thing jumped out at me that you were talking, as you were talking there, is there anything that you would highlight with respect to women getting into this industry?
Situations like that where you don't really think about it that much. I mean, obviously, I wish more women were in the industry. I don't think that there is much difference between when I'm interviewing associates. I don't specifically look for female candidates. Certainly if there are good ones, I will interview them. It is, as a female getting into the industry, you do have to realize that you will be in the minority. There are, I think, I should know the numbers more, but there are significantly more men than there are women. We have a handful of female analysts, and I probably have 12 to 15 female associates out of 80. So yeah, there aren't a ton of females in any parts of the capital markets, I would say. Sales, trading, any parts of it. There are just, not as many women. I think I'm not going to say you don't have to have sharp elbows or anything like that, but you do have to, you do have to realize that there are going to be more men than you in the business, and that it's still a male dominated business. There's even in the CEO ranks, there are more male CEOs than there are female CEOs. So I think we've come a long way, but we have a ways to go.
Okay. Alison, there has been so much valuable info you have shared. I can't tell how much I appreciate you taking the time to do this. And I know our audience is really going to benefit from it. Let me wrap, if I may, with one quick question here. And, you can draw from what you've talked about already, or if there's something else you'd highlight. What's one thing our audience can do if you're a student right now? What's one thing you can do to help move the ball forward and increase your chances of being able to secure a spot in equity research? I try to ask people for like very actionable takeaways that somebody can, who's like, what's my next step? This is one step that moves the ball forward for me.
If you're not taking a finance course, take one. And if there's some kind of an investment club or group at your school, join it, make it. If there isn't one, start one. That type of thing, I would say is a good step forward. Having that, demonstrating to me that you have an interest in the investment world, and in the finance part of it is an important part. So they probably already are taking finance courses, but if they're not, make sure that you're taking one of those. The Canadian securities course is still a great thing to do. Like, if you're interested in the securities business, you can sign up for the Canadian securities course. You do not have to be employed in the securities business to take it. And it's a really good introduction into the business. And then CFA level 1 is also a good one to take as well. It gives you a good basis, and it shows some desire and commitment to being in the industry.
Got it. Alison, you've been more than generous with your time. I greatly appreciate it. Our audience appreciates it. Thanks so much for taking the time to do this with us.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
Awesome. Have a great day.
You too.